So, welcome back to Empowering Personal Professional Leadership Pivots with Professor Mark Erath. In this section, we'll be covering 10 systematic tactics for pivoting and change, and we will also be reviewing two change management models.
Welcome to the Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. In each episode, we invite experts to share their passion and their leadership journey to help you in your next steps. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Now, here's the host of Next Steps to Leadership, Dr. Stephen Oliver.
So, let's move into helping with empowering personal and professional leadership pivots. You have another model for us, 10 systematic tactics. I wondered if you could tell us about those tactics.
Yeah, definitely. And again, this is all about you taking action at the center of these activities. And tactics are more short term, specific tasks that you proceed to implement that support the overarching strategic plan, tactical activities. And doing these tactical things that we're going to talk about really require deliberate actions that you're doing to focus on effective change. At the same time, you're doing routine daily activities. So it's not like you take all the routine stuff off your plate. We'll talk about how you make room on the plate to do these change activities, but you're improving yourself, you're improving your ability to go in new directions. At the same time, you're performing at a high level on the things that are within your scope of responsibility now. So, the first tactic, Dr. O, and this was so important in my own life, is to diversify yourself.
Yes.
Really fundamental to support your development or growth, resilience, and agility, preparing yourself for what's next and things you may not even anticipate. So, really, what you have to do is, again, this definition of pivoting is devoting to completely changing the way you do something for different and better outcomes. It's also about thinking differently, gaining new knowledge and skills. So you got to get in the groove of diversifying. And it's kind of simple in a way. I mean, hang with people who have different abilities and skills than you do that you want
Yes.
and need to develop to move in the direction of your North Star as you see it, where you want to go. And one way I did it, I was an accountant and auditor, as you mentioned early on. And, kind of talk about a pivot and a change. At one point in my career, we had no consulting practice in our office or our region and our firm. And my boss basically came to me and said, Mark, you're really good at solving problems, and we don't have a consulting practice. So we want you to start one. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm the accountant and auditor,
Right. Yeah.
solving problems and building relationships and all that. But
Mhm.
it was me, and I had to start from scratch and act as an entrepreneur with sponsorship to build pretty rapidly a very diverse and high performing consulting firm, consulting practice. And we really did remarkable things.
Yeah.
Fortunate to hire. And I was more the orchestra leader in pulling it together. But what I needed quickly is to develop very specific new knowledge and skills to be a better consultant, to be able to engage with buyers of my services, leaders
Right.
within healthcare organizations primarily. And so I joined the American College of Healthcare Executives. And instead of
Right.
all my training and activities being focused on the accounting and auditing profession, I was focused on executive leadership, operations, strategy, and it changed everything for me. I no longer thought in the filters I had developed over 10 or more years.
Right. Being an accountant and auditor and numbers and systematic, you had to push yourself out of that. So
Exactly.
that's
And
fantastic.
really, I think what I found was that I had a latent ability to do that. And people saw that in me, which is why they asked me to do it. But I didn't feel like I was really ready to do that. I had skills and abilities and native talent, if you will, but I had to develop that by getting in a completely different arena and hanging with different people, learning different things, new skills. And that made me much more effective very quickly.
It's a fantastic example.
Yep.
How about our next tactic?
Yeah, so I say, get psyched to pivot. And what I'm really getting at here is one, it's a mental thing, of course, but they're actual competencies and skills that support your focus and mental orientation to manage change as opposed to just managing routine daily activities. So you need to arm yourself with proven mindsets and techniques for
Mhm.
managing change successfully. And what I'm recommending is that you study and begin practically applying, and it's not rocket science, two complementary change management approaches. And the first one, which I'll display here, is Lewin's 3-step process for small changes. And it's pretty simple. And you read more and study about how you go about doing this, but in order to affect change in small ways, you got to unfreeze the current situation. You got to then, in step two, change to something new. And then after you've made the change, refreeze the situation after that change has been implemented. Pretty simple, kind of intuitive, but it's systematic. If you're fighting the battle of changing to something new without unfreezing the old ineffective habits, you're going to be swimming upstream. So it's, again, kind of like common sense. And I would commend folks to read a little bit more and study about Lewin. It's covered in all the major sort of management textbooks. And you can, Google it and look online, and
Yes.
it's really good advice. Now, and
And Lewin is not
yeah,
it's not brand new. It's been around for a while, but it's a tried and
yeah.
true model.
And it's
Yeah.
scalable to any situation, Dr. O. I mean,
Yes.
it applies
Yeah.
to us individually or a change in our work situation. The next one is Cotter's 8-step approach for large change. And these 8 steps are systematic, they're overt actions that you take to manage change when the situation's a little bit more complicated. And the 8 steps are set urgencies. People have to feel a need for change to be able to buy into it. You have to create a guiding coalition, get people behind the change, convey a vision of the change that is needed, communicate to everybody who's going to be affected,
Mhm.
empower action that's needed to do the change, create short-term wins, again, those small bites rather than trying to tackle, boil the ocean, as they say,
Right.
consolidate the gain, including celebrations, and then anchor the changes in the culture. So it's not just mechanical, it's people feel it at a visceral level and they're committed to it. So, you can again read a little
I
bit
just
more about it. Good, Dr.
if I've used this model before in teaching, and one thing is it seems so overwhelming. 8 things, how can I do them all? And I just say take it one step at a time.
Yep.
Um, and as you said earlier, Professor Erath, get that team to help out with that change.
And
But there is urgency
yeah,
in change. A lot of people don't take urgency.
right. Well, and these two really overlap with each other. And
Mhm.
Cotter's model is a refinement and unbundling of elements
Mhm.
that are inherent in Lewin's approach. And I think, like any kind of process, including the ones that we're talking about here, the 6 strategies and 10
Yeah.
tactics, think of it like a recipe in a sense. If you skip and scrimp on some of the steps, then the pie or cake at the end is probably not going to be as good as it could.
Right.
It's also recognize that setting urgency, I mean, you may be on a burning platform. Everybody
Mhm.
understands the urgency. So, done, check. Everybody gets that. So, even though it has 8 steps, you might move through any number of these very quickly, but it demands attention because if you leave something out of the batch, maybe the cake won't rise or it'll taste
Right.
bad. It'll be as hard as a rock and not taste good at the end of the day.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
How about let's come back to the 10 tactics in the third one?
Yeah. We talked earlier about developing a portfolio, a strategic portfolio of changes that you need to make longer term that are kind of on your radar screen. You only have so many resources to go around. Maybe that's your time and energy. So you got to use that limited amount of resources judiciously so that you're not overstretched. So what I recommend is that you take that portfolio, that strategic portfolio, and prioritize your efforts based on the most important changes that you envision or parts of changes that you envision. And you can score using a simple method. You need to think about okay, given all the different changes that are in my portfolio, which ones are going to have the greatest impact and which ones are going to be the greatest likelihood to succeed. Start there. And your filter in which you're gauging impact and likelihood of success is relative to that strategic North Star goals of where you want to
Right.
go. You can't do everything at once. So you got to make clever choices. A management technique that is often referred to is the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle,
Mhm.
where you select your priorities based upon the 20% that have 80% of the impact. So
Yes.
you got to work on a manageable number of a relatively few priorities or elements of them so that you're not overextending yourself or setting yourself up to fail at everything because you just have too much on your plate. So you got to have balance between the changes that you're acting on as well as the ongoing routine activities. If you drop the ball in the routine, that's going to create other problems for you.
That's good. And I like the way you keep coming back to the North Star, where you're headed, what's your ultimate goal and your direction. So that's nice.
Yeah.
How about number four? What are we doing
Yeah,
here?
so I talked about adapting lean processes and lean in the sense of simple and easy. There's
Mhm.
lean as a methodology of performance improvement, and you could use those techniques too, but I meant it in a lowercase L sense. So, we're talking about 6 strategies and 10 steps and Lewin's 8 steps, and it's like overwhelming. The goal here is not to have the processes become a speed
Mhm.
bump or barrier because there's too
Right.
many ingredients, too many things going on at once. So you got to be realistic and take action in ways that are proportionate to the complexity of the change. That doesn't mean skipping steps, but it means sizing steps in a way that are suited to the degree of difficulty involved, let's say. So you just need to adapt accordingly and make your change management pivot actions practical and doable.
And I would also add is be aware when multiple changes occur at once. I had a conversation with a friend yesterday, and three major things in her life all happened within a week. Actually, two of them in one day. And she's like, why is this all happening to me? And I'm like, well, it's part of life, and these changes are occurring rapidly. And how can you just adjust to all? And it wasn't easy, but she's working through it. So they can happen. Change can layer on top of each other.
There's a really great person who I got to meet many years ago. He's a motivational speaker, a very interesting
Mhm.
person. His name is W. Mitchell. He went through some horrific experiences in his life. He went through a plane crash, he was burned, and so forth. And his talk focuses on, I could focus on the 8,000 things I used to be able to do before my accidents and be miserable, or I can focus on the 2,000 things that I can do and thrive in those. So his theme of all of his talks is it's not what happens to you, it's what you do about it. And
Right,
so, you
exactly.
know, we're all overwhelmed from time to time and maybe too
Mhm,
often at times, but it gets back to the point of breaking things down,
mhm.
understanding things in perspective and dealing with them one thing at a time with the support of people who care about you, mentors and coaches. So you got to make sure that while you're also working on change, that you're balancing all the other responsibilities and what I would call all the departments in your life, your work, your family,
Yeah,
life, other commitments, and especially you, because you can't allow the change process and the here and now, the
mhm,
daily grind to sap your energy and you become burned out and then you really crash and burn,
right.
not just in execution, but mentally and emotionally. So, one of the things that I focus on, and, I've done a lot of work in the quality and performance improvement, is the whole idea of eliminating waste in the ongoing activities that you're undertaking that rob the time and resources that you need to redirect in investing in change. Now, this is something we
Yes,
should do all the time, whether we're changing or not, but too often there's so much embedded waste in what we do and how we do things that we need to become to be really good change agents. We need to change the equation and wring out all the different forms of waste in our lives. And
and I
then,
might just add
yeah,
something.
please,
Be
yes.
careful what you ask for sometimes, because I just recently added something socially in my life, and I thought, oh, this is great. Join this group to do this fun thing. But then it's like, oh, there's meetings, there's times to get together, there's preparing for it. I'm like, I just added a lot more work,
Well,
even though it's social. But I wanted this change in my life, and so you have to be mindful of those things, I would add.
Well, and it takes me to the sort of other part of this making room
Uh-huh.
for change is you really got to hone your time management skills and techniques.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah,
some people seem to do naturally, but if you're like me, you got to really work hard at it. And being good at time management is part and parcel to eliminating waste as well, but there can be other forms of
right.
waste. So, do some homework, get some advice, do some research on role model approaches on how to
Mhm.
eliminate waste and how to perfect your time management skills. We all have the same amount of time, it's just how we use it. And so we need
Exactly.
to think about how do we do more, better, and faster with the limited resources of time and energy that we have to work with.
Great. How about number 7?
Yeah.
What
So
are we doing here?
7 is we kind of covered this a little bit, but you got to break
Uh,
up the tasks involved in your pivoting
uh-huh.
into manageable segments using proven tools to manage those efforts. And we talked about you eat an elephant one spoon at a time. A more
Mhm.
specific way of how to do that is if you have defined a strategic pivot plan around a specific topic that you're working on, create and implement a simple 90-day tactical plan or a series of them that are needed so that you can engage and sustain the implementation of the specific change actions. So it's like a schedule, it's a project plan, if you will. And you need to
Right.
methodically manage your tactical action plans and how you're fulfilling them. Now, a technique, Dr. O, that was life changing for me, it's a tool that comes out of the lean performance improvement methodology,
Mhm.
Toyota production system, is called an A3 template. You know, A3, for people who live in the rest of the world, it's a ledger size sheet of paper. It's what they call a ledger size sheet of paper, certainly in Japan at least, and maybe elsewhere in the
Mhm.
world. So the brilliant management thinkers at Toyota came up with a series of techniques borrowing from Dr. W. Edwards Deming to create
Right.
the Toyota production system. And one of those was to use an A3 template to define and manage performance improvement or problem solving. So,
Yes.
an A3 template, and it's an actual document. I'll show you an example of it, but it's also a way of thinking, it's a method. So, the way A3 works is 7 elements. You have to define the problem with laser like precision. What is it that you're trying to solve? You define what the current state is, the facts. You envision and enumerate what the future state is that you're trying to achieve, and your target,
Right.
qualitative and quantitative, ideally. You
Hmm.
do a gap analysis at the root cause, drilling down between the current and the future state. And that identifies for you what actions you need to take to close the gap. Once you got the gaps identified, then you enumerate the specific changes that you're going to make to close the gap. You then create, in essence, a project plan uh, on how you're going to execute those changes. And they have smart elements: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. That SMART
Yes.
acronym. And then you use that execution plan to monitor success, and then at the end you create a follow-up or sustainment plan to freeze the changes that you've made.
Mhm.
So it's again kind of a methodology, single sheet of paper that you can use and actually engage with your mentors
Yes.
to get feedback on your progress as you go. So you create this A3 template that lays out your plan, then becomes a tool for execution of the plan all the way through completion and sustainment. I'm going to flash, it's a little hard to read clearly on the screen, but we can make this available to everybody. This is
Yes. And all of this we can make available.
perfect.
This leads nicely into your eighth, mentoring coaching. We've kind of already talked about that today, but that's the eighth tactic.
Exactly. And it's pretty
Yeah.
simple. And you already have your team mobilized, ideally, and you need to activate them so they're not just helping you on the periphery, big picture,
Yeah.
but they're actually engaged with you as you're executing your specific plans.
And then winding down the last two, you're documenting the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Again, where the A3 continues to be relevant, it really requires a deliberate effort for you to reflect on your progress. I recommend you do it kind of weekly, informally, but
Mhm.
then more formally at the end of each 90-day cycle, listing out your accomplishments, your next steps. And so it's all documented in writing. You have a record that really requires discipline. It keeps you on point and forces you, really. You know, maybe you don't need to be forced, I don't mean to sound coercive, but to write things down, it demands that you're thinking about
Uh,
it. Keep it simple, log your reflections, and make how you document your progress meaningful so that you're holding yourself accountable and identifying what's next along the way.
And I just want to add what's really important about you saying this, Professor Mark, is that we don't remember as humans. It's hard to remember what we had for lunch on Saturday, or the week before. It's hard to remember what to do. In my human resource courses, I teach the students you must document, especially when you're working with other employees. And I think this is important for your own strategy, your own tactics, your own pivoting as you're creating these models. Write things down. You won't remember them. And it's important to go back and say, all right, well, on this date, I did this. So that's a great tactic here in all 10 of these, is to just write these down. And then the last one, I
Yeah.
love that term.
Yeah, well, it closes out and reinforces the
Uh,
cyclical, systematic nature of what we know about in a tactical as well as in a strategic sense. So it's wash, rinse, and repeat. You got to persist
yes,
in keeping your eyes on the prize and the pedal to the metal in executing your specific pivot action plans that are linked
yes,
to the strategies. So every few months, as you're going through these processes that are really happening simultaneously, step back, think in a grand sense as well as inside the box, but beyond the box. Revisit your grand strategies as well as the tactical plans to think about how what you've accomplished in a journey, you're continuing to do it, but how is that moving you forward towards your North Star and the various waypoints
right.
that you have to clear to get to your ultimate destinations. And it also gives you an opportunity with your mentors, coaches, and the people around you to really
Mhm.
celebrate the successes along the way.
Well, you've given us a lot today in this empowering personal professional leadership pivots, specifically your own journey, which is great, and writing that down. I encourage a lot of people to do that no matter where you are in your career. And then the professional leadership plan of action, where you are now and what's the reality. You gave us some really concrete, specific models, 6 step systematic strategies, 10 tactics, and then just a connection to both two really tried and true change management gurus, Lewin and Cotter. And then this, I really like this model here, this A3 template. So this is very powerful. Any final things to say about pivoting with yourself or where you're going in your career? Any final words or thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Dr. Owen. Again, thanks for this opportunity to give me the spark to actually write these ideas down because they've been
Mhm.
swimming in my head for so long. And
Yes.
I
Uh-huh.
guess my last closing thought would be to realize it's a journey and you're never going to necessarily achieve perfection, but you're going to have so much fun and learn so much and become a much better version of yourself
Mhm.
all along the way. And that's really the most satisfying thing as I see it. And so that's why I feel like if you get out of a mode of, as I did too often, of just kind of winging it and using a systematic approach or various
Mhm.
systematic tools, you'll be much more efficient and effective in making those shifts and pivots that you need to do over your career. You'll be much more resilient in the down times. You'll be more agile to capture all the positive opportunities that are out there. And you'll be much more fulfilled, which to me is all about impacting the people all around you. And then you'll spread the wisdom to other people through your experience and how you conduct yourself.
I know it's hard for everyone, but if you can be open, receptive to change, because change is just going to continue to happen, and then use a lot of what Professor Mark has said, I think that can help all of you. So I just wanted to thank again Professor Mark Erath, Professor of Health Sciences at the University of Virginia, Professional and Continuing Study. And he does a lot of other coaching and consulting and volunteering to others. I can't thank you enough to come today. It's been a pleasure. I want to thank all the viewers for coming in to my podcast, Taking the Next Step in Leadership. If you need any assistance with any human resources or learning, contact me at HRC Vision Leadership Consultancy. I also teach for the University of Virginia part-time. If you would like specific details, we will have this information from Professor Erath. Thanks again for coming today.
Thanks, Dr. O.
You've been tuning in to Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.